The gym fell silent as Max hit the polished floor with a heavy thud, gasping under Rachel's knee. The quiet girl he'd mocked for weeks had just dropped him with a precision no one saw coming. As Rachel stood, her calm voice pierced the stunned crowd. "This isn't about being tough, Max. It's about respect." But what happened next would change everything. First, let's rewind to where it all began. Rachel Turner navigated the bustling halls of Lincoln High with a deliberate focus, each step purposeful and precise. Her neatly pressed uniform, spotless sneakers, and neatly braided hair were testaments to the care she poured into presenting herself. A silent reminder to herself that she would not let this new school define her. But as the sole black student in her junior class, she felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments. Every sideways glance, every fleeting whisper behind cupped hands, cut through the air like static. Rachel's resolve remained intact. She had endured far worse. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "They'll try to break you, but you don't bend for anyone." She had learned early on that silence could be a powerful shield. But silence was exactly what Max Harper, the self-declared king of Lincoln High, sought to shatter. Max was everything Rachel despised: arrogant, entitled, and desperate for an audience. He thrived on the laughs of his cronies and the attention of a school that, for whatever reason, tolerated his reign. Spotting Rachel at her usual lunch table, off to the side, quietly flipping through her well-worn sketchbook, Max decided she was his next target. With a swagger that demanded the room's attention, Max approached. "Hey, Turner!" His voice rang out, casual and loud, carrying an edge that made conversations around the cafeteria fizzle into silence. "What's with your hair? You get caught in a tornado, or is that the new thing these days?" He turned to his friends, grinning as though he had just delivered the punchline of the century. The laughter started slowly but built in waves, filling the room with a toxic undercurrent. Rachel looked up briefly, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer him a reaction, no furrowed brow, no retort. She simply returned her gaze to the page, dragging her pencil deliberately over the lines of her sketch. Max leaned closer, emboldened by her restraint. "I'm talking to you, Turner. Or did that weave block your ears?" The room erupted. Rachel's grip tightened on the pencil, but her face remained a mask of calm. A storm brewed beneath the surface, a clash of pride and shame as the cafeteria buzzed with cruel laughter. Max stood over her, triumphant, as if her lack of response had confirmed his dominance. But even as Rachel sat in silence, a quiet defiance burned within her. She wasn't retreating. She was choosing her moment. She glanced at Max, her eyes briefly meeting his. It was a gaze that didn't plead or panic. It promised. Rachel wasn't done, not by a long shot. The metallic clang of Rachel's locker echoed down the hallway as Max swung it open with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. The corridor was mostly empty this early in the morning, giving him the space he needed to enact his latest spectacle. With deliberate theatrics, he grabbed her books, journals, and lunch container, flinging them onto the cold linoleum floor. The scene looked staged, almost like an exaggerated pantomime for an audience that wasn't there yet. Max didn't mind. Soon the hall would fill, and Rachel Turner's silent resilience would become the punchline of his carefully orchestrated joke. Rachel turned the corner just in time to see Max's foot knock her sketchbook, its pages fluttering across the floor. Her breath caught for a split second, the sight of her carefully drawn illustrations scattering like fallen leaves slicing through her composure. She stopped mid-stride, taking in the scene with a clinical detachment that masked the sting of anger rising beneath her calm exterior. Max noticed her immediately, his smirk widening into a taunting grin. "Well, look who decided to show up," he jeered, arms spread theatrically as if welcoming her to the main event. He leaned casually against the lockers, exuding the kind of manufactured confidence that fed off the approval of others. As the first few students arrived, the energy in the hallway shifted, whispers rippling among the growing crowd. "You're not going to do anything, are you, Turner?" Max sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "Just walk away like the coward you are." Rachel stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the growing silence. She bent down, one knee touching the floor, and began collecting her things. The air in the hallway thickened as the crowd murmured, a strange mix of unease and anticipation crackling in the space around them. Max crossed his arms, his grin faltering slightly as he watched Rachel. Her lack of reaction wasn't just confusing, it was unsettling. "She's so weird," one of his cronies muttered, breaking the silence. The words hung awkwardly, failing to land in the way Max had hoped. Rachel rose to her feet, clutching her battered sketchbook to her chest. For a moment her eyes locked with Max's, calm yet piercing, holding a depth he couldn't decipher. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely, something that made his confidence falter for a fraction of a second. Without a word, Rachel walked past him, leaving the crowd and Max himself unsure of what they had just witnessed. The echo of a basketball hitting the gym floor faded as the last of the after-school stragglers left, leaving the wide-open space eerily quiet. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, casting long golden beams across the polished hardwood. Rachel adjusted her backpack and made her way toward the exit, her mind elsewhere, until a voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Going somewhere, Turner?" Max Harper's voice was sharp, his tone edged with a cruelty honed over years of unchecked entitlement. He stepped out from behind the bleachers, his cronies close behind, their laughter low and conspiratorial. They spread out like a pack of wolves, their movements calculated to block her escape. Rachel stopped in her tracks, her pulse steady but her muscles coiled. Max's smirk was wide and predatory. "Let's see how tough you really are," he taunted, his words echoing in the empty gym. He took a step forward, then another, the squeak of his sneakers the only sound in the vast space. Rachel exhaled slowly, her mother's voice steady in her mind. "Pick your battles, but when the time comes, stand your ground." She dropped her backpack at her feet, straightened her posture, and met Max's gaze. "Not going to run?" he sneered. "Guess I'll have to make this interesting." Without waiting for a response, Max lunged, his hand reaching to grab her arm. Rachel moved like water, sidestepping his clumsy advance with precision that seemed effortless. Max stumbled, his momentum throwing him off balance, and the brief gasp of shock from his cronies was audible. Before he could recover, Rachel shifted. In one fluid motion, she swept his legs out from under him, pivoted, and dropped him to the floor with controlled force. The air rushed out of Max's lungs in a strangled gasp as he hit the ground, her knee pinning his chest. She held him there with a strength that betrayed years of practice, her breathing steady, her movements deliberate. The stunned silence of the gym was broken by a gasp from the crowd gathering by the door. Rachel's voice, low and calm, cut through the tension like a razor. "This isn't about being tough, Max," she said, her tone steady, her eyes locked on his. "It's about respect." She stood slowly, releasing him, her gaze unwavering. Max lay there, wide-eyed and breathless, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. The weight of her words lingered in the air as Rachel turned and walked away, leaving nothing but silence and the unmistakable taste of defeat in her wake. By the time the first bell rang on Monday morning, Lincoln High was buzzing. News of Friday's events had spread far beyond the gym. Whispers echoed through the hallways, fragmented tales of how Rachel Turner, quiet, unassuming Rachel, had taken down Max Harper. Some described it as poetic justice, others as a long overdue reckoning. What no one could dispute was the shift in the air. The invisible grip Max had held over the school had loosened, replaced by something new, respect for Rachel, and an unspoken acknowledgement that power didn't always roar. It could move in silence and still change everything. Max was nowhere to be seen that morning. His usual strut down the main hallway, flanked by his ever-loyal cronies, had been replaced by scattered whispers of his absence. Some claimed he was home sick. Others said he was too humiliated to face the aftermath. His closest followers, now untethered, had disbanded, dissolving into the background like smoke after a fire. Without their ringleader, their bravado meant nothing. Rachel moved through the hall with her usual measured pace, her head high but her expression unchanged. The eyes that had once glanced past her now lingered, but not with mockery. There was admiration in those stares, a quiet awe for the girl who had faced down the school's most feared bully without hesitation. Rachel didn't acknowledge the attention. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken for themselves. In second period English, Mr. Carter, a reserved but perceptive teacher, stopped Rachel after class. "I heard about Friday," he said, his voice soft but probing. "Is there anything you want to talk about?" Rachel met his gaze, her expression calm but firm. "No, Mr. Carter," she replied simply. "Sometimes the best way to teach a lesson is to show people what they need to see." Mr. Carter paused, considering her words, then nodded. "Fair enough," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well said, Rachel." The rest of the day passed quietly, but the whispers didn't stop. As Rachel walked to her locker at the final bell, she caught snippets of conversations, her name paired with words like amazing and brave. She felt no need to respond. The halls that had once felt heavy with tension now felt open, light, as though the school itself had exhaled. As she left for the day, Rachel paused at the double doors and glanced back. The world hadn't changed, not entirely, but something was different now. She had shown them, all of them, that respect wasn't given, it was earned. And as she stepped into the crisp autumn air, the weight she had carried for so long lifted just a little, leaving behind the quiet satisfaction of justice served.